Today, we are talking about a companion gardening method developed by Native Americans that plants corn, beans, and squash together, the Three Sisters Garden. I've mentioned this in the videos I have about these individual crops and thought it would be great if we tied that all together. Hi, I'm Amy. Welcome to my channel. Squash, maize, or corn, and beans were domesticated in Mesoamerica between 5 and 6,000 years ago. Seeds were traded, and it didn't take long before they were cultivated by indigenous people throughout North America. Different varieties were developed to meet regional microclimates and soil conditions. By the time European settlers arrived in New England, the Iroquois and Wampanoag cultures had established an agricultural calendar based on these crops. These foods were shared with the colonists in what we refer to as the first Thanksgiving. Traditionally, the Three Sisters Gardens use a no-till approach. It seeks to form a micro ecosystem in which plants and animals foster. Mounds of dirt were created in which to plant the seeds. These mounds also helped hold the soil and the water in place, lessening erosion. Gardens were seen as communities of plants. The garden was part of the larger community of the village and the tribe and included everything that lived in that ecological community. Many indigenous cultures planted extra, left out seeds, or planted wildlife gardens to help the animals that lived nearby, and I'm sure to divert them from their main crops. Like the Three Sisters philosophy of building community, feeding local wildlife was also seen as helping your community, a way of sharing with your brothers and sisters. It was that sense of community that led the infamous Squanto to teach the early colonists how to grow crops in the quote unquote new land. The practice in Europe at the time was to sow seeds by tossing them on the ground. This worked fine for crops like wheat and barley. Native Americans deliberately planted seeds. In this way, they were choosing the best seeds and breeding new species. Here, Tosquantum is seen putting a dead fish in the ground to act as fertilizer. Indigenous farmers did have methods to protect their crops. Scarecrows and fences were used. Platforms were built in the gardens. Children would sit on the platforms and sing to keep birds away from corn ears. Haditsa farmers feel that singing is good for the plants. Corn was a staple crop and could be made into flour. It was planted in the middle of the mound. Beans are planted around the corn. The beans climb up the corn and also fix nitrogen in the soil. Squash is planted on the outside of the mound. The viney varieties of squash weaved around the mound and shaded out weeds. The prickly leaves of the squashes also inhibit raccoons and deer. I will say the squash can make it a bit hard to harvest the beans and walk around the garden. Ideally, when using this mound method, you'll form a pile of soil. Build the mound so that it's 4 to 6 inches high and 18 inches across. Level off the top. Build each mound so that the center is about 4 feet apart. Remember, you want the squashes to have plenty of room to wander. I have individual videos on how to grow beans, corn, and winter squash for some planting guidance. I'll link these in the description. Also, it's perfectly okay to plant your three sisters in a raised bed. Just follow the same principles. Often, the corn is planted first so it can get a few weeks start on the beans. I must be a lazy gardener because I've used this method and have started everything at the same time. You can also transplant the corn and then direct seed beans and squash, and that way you'll give your corn a head start. Sunflowers were also often planted around the Three Sisters gardens. They acted as a pollinator and drew birds away from the corn. In Three Sisters gardens among the Tuwa and other southwestern tribes, Rocky Mountain bee plant is grown to encourage pollinators in the fields. Many of the world's biggest cash crops were developed by indigenous Americans, including chocolate, tobacco, peanuts, and yes, potatoes. Native American farmers are still working today to breed new species of plants and produce food for their communities. I hope you found this interesting. Subscribe to my channel for videos on organic gardening and wildlife conservation. Thanks for watching and have a sunny day.